Good to see you again. Do you want to come and sit down?
Christian Wakeford wanted a new party leader and now he's got one. He led the charge of Tory MPs demanding Boris Johnson be replaced, but now he's defected to Labour.
Really difficult to do, but you've done the right thing.
Today is the first day in my adult life that I've not been a member of a Conservative Party. It's that serious. So I hope they will understand that it's a matter that I've not come too lightly. I've had to do a serious amount of soul searching.
Christian Wakeford says he was wrestling with his conscience when he delivered this Christmas card to the Prime Minister. 5 weeks later, he waited to go into the Commons for question time as usual, but then turned right to sit on the Labour benches. He was cheered to his seat by Labour MPs, now joined by a Union Jack face mask.
And as for Bury South, Mr. Speaker, as for Bury South, let me say to the right gentleman, Mr. Speaker, by all leave, may I say to the right honourable gentleman that the Conservative Party won Bury South for the first time in generations under this Prime Minister, with an agenda of uniting and levelling up and delivering for the people of Bury South. And Mr. Speaker, we will win again in Bury South at the next election under this Prime Minister.
It was a bullish performance compared to the crumpled appearance on TV yesterday.
Bury South is now a Labour seat, Prime Minister.
But it was yesterday's shaky TV appearance by the Prime Minister that had prompted one Tory veteran to deploy against him the words that were used calling for Neville Chamberlain to quit office.
But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
They'd both resigned from Theresa May's cabinet over Brexit. Brexiteers now at war with each other.
I must say to the right honourable gentleman, I don't know what he's talking about, but what I can tell him, I don't know what quotation he's alluding to that he's referring. But what I can tell him is that I think I've told this House repeatedly throughout this pandemic, I take full responsibility for everything done in this government and throughout the pandemic.
Boris Johnson's allies insisted that David Davis was a maverick, a lone voice.
He's just an old warhorse. He's not really speaking for a lot of people, you think?
No, he speaks for himself, and I appreciate that, and I value him and his contribution to the parliamentary party, but he is, someone who critiques all.
Christian Wakeford emerging from number 10 a couple of months ago after a reception for the 2019 intake. His letter demanding a vote of no confidence is no longer valid. Some of the 2019 arrivals who posed with Boris Johnson when they were first elected to Parliament were last night meeting to discuss when and how to depose him. Some agreed to put in letters of their own. The leader of the Scottish Conservatives, who has put in a letter, says the defection today is a setback for the uprising.
Do you think the cause of trying to get rid of Boris Johnson took a step back in the last few hours?
Well, I think, a defection to the Labour Party from the Conservative benches is extremely rare, and therefore it galvanises support on the Conservative benches. But I do think we are seeing a momentum building.
You think it's probably terminal politically for the Prime Minister? It's a question of when, not if.
I think MPs went back to their constituencies last weekend and will do so this weekend and get an awful lot of feedback from members, from constituents who are remaining unhappy at the current situation with the Prime Minister.
Some loyalists from the 2019 intake said their contemporaries should calm down and rally to the Prime Minister.
We are very inexperienced compared to the older intake. They've been through a lot. They've been through Brexit, COVID. We've just joined and hit COVID straight away. So we've got a lot to learn.
And some of your colleagues might be being a bit too jumpy, you think?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, now is not the time to be challenging the PM. Not at all.
The latest in Channel 4 News' series of red wall polls studying voters in seats like Penistone and Stockbridge, snatched from Labour in the general election, could keep the pressure on Boris Johnson. In the general election, the Tories polled an average of 48% in these seats, Labour 39%. A year later, after months of lockdown, our first red wall poll showed the Tories down, Labour climbing. The vaccine bounce brought the Tories back up. Just 1 month ago, we polled again, and despite rows over Boris Johnson trying to spring a Tory MP from being censured, the Tories were still ahead narrowly. Then, stories of parties in Downing Street surfaced and multiplied. And our latest poll shows they have plummeted the Tories down to 37%, Labour up to 48%. It would mean of the 45 red wall seats the Tories gained from Labour in 2019, the key to Boris Johnson's 80-strong majority, they would, on our projection, hold on to just 3 of them. Whitehall parties, it seems, are to blame.
So it seems to be, a reliable reflection of the truth, and certainly I've had many people contact me to say how disappointed and angry they are, and I completely understand. I share that anger and disappointment.
Past red wall polls show voters' view of whether Boris Johnson's doing well, show his ratings bounced around a bit with the twists and turns of COVID, dipped when Tories rowed about changing Commons rules to rescue a Tory MP. But in the last few weeks, since stories about parties surfaced, his ratings have plummeted. When we asked voters who'd backed the Tories in 2019 what would be their main hesitations now, the most popular answers were Boris Johnson, deception, sleaze and trust.
I thought Boris was fine at the beginning, and it's been in this last year, and now, no.
I think he did all right as far as the pandemic's concerned until all of this came out, but I think he's just shot himself in the foot now.
A party they didn't even know. You know what a party is, don't you?
Drinking in the garden and having this great big party, it's just ludicrous.
You're quite sure, you're 100% sure Boris Johnson's the man to pull them back. He looks like he's turned into a repelling magnet in this poll.
Well, I absolutely understand people's anger and frustration, and I think in 2019 he was seen as almost an anti-establishment figure, and that's what appeals to people when they voted for him. And what's happened in Downing Street makes it just look more of the establishment, doesn't it? And
Miriam Cates, like many Tory MPs, says she's reserving judgment on the whole affair until the Sue Gray report. Red wall voters we polled are not, and their voices will be echoing in MPs' ears for as long as these stories rumble on.